Greetings. Good afternoon. Good evening. How y'all doing? My name is Tandasizwe Shimaringa, and you are listening to, tuning into Rootwork, not Root, Rootwork here on the Black Power Media Network. Thank you so much for joining me. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to the Patreon, like the video. I think you should like it now before you finish actually watching it. But I understand if you want to wait, it's all good. But thank you again so much. Thank you again for tuning in last week. Hopefully, you saw really kind of basically my first broadcast of Black August, the study and struggle session where we talked about transforming the colonial criminal mentality. We spoke with Brother Yusef Bunchy Shakur, organizer out of Detroit. We talked about the Battle of Algiers. We'll be discussing this coming Thursday, our study and struggle session number 2, talking about Kwasi Balagoon with Brother Kazimbe Balagoon, organizer out of New York City. But tonight, again, subscribe to Black Power Media, subscribe on Patreon, and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like, hit that share button. So tonight we're going to get into our discussion with artist Boots Riley. Now, I need to let you know this ahead of time. Due to the call of the Writers Guild of America, when their strike began in April of this year, a request was made to writers not to do any promotion of their work. And as a member of both the Directors and Writers Guilds, Boots will be honoring that call tonight, so we will not be discussing any of his current projects, and that includes taking questions from BPM members. Sorry about that, y'all. The Writers Guild of America has been on strike now for close to 100 days, and there does not seem to be any end in sight. Even negotiations between the writers and the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents the studios, have been stalled since May. The AMPTP has gone on record basically saying that they are content to wait the writers out until the writers begin getting evicted from their homes due to non-payment of their bills. That's some diabolical stuff right there. In July, 160,000 members of the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, the Actors, SAG-AFTRA, they also went on strike, joining the 11,000 members of the Writers Guild on picket lines against the diabolical machinations of the Hollywood machine. Both guilds are concerned about, amongst other things, revenue from streaming and the threat that artificial intelligence poses to their future careers. So here now to talk with me about this and provide some context for these labor actions in the midst of more than 3,000 strikes that have been occurring here in the U.S. since the spring of 2020. Straight out of Oakland, California is Boots Riley, activist, writer, director, musical artist, co-founder of hip-hop group The Coup. Thank you so much for being on Rootwork here on Black Power Media today.
Hey, thank you for having me. How you doing?
I am doing good, trying to figure out this technology. So yeah, let's talk about this need for a general strike. Now, you have been giving interviews since the strike began, and you have been unashamed talking about your politics as a communist and how this action, which a lot of people see, let's just keep it a buck. Some people see it as, ain't these actors already making millions? Ain't they already got enough? You have made it a point to continuously talk about this issue in the context of other strikes. So let's start there. Why are you continuously mentioning this in the context of other strikes?
Well, just to handle one little piece of that, yeah, there are actors and directors and writers that are getting paid a good amount of money, but that's not most of the writers or most of the actors. And the strike is about the ones on the lowest level of those unions, right? So, for instance, there was a woman on Twitter who talked about how she had been in 3 writers' rooms in the past 3 years and sold and even sold a pilot to a studio and still was on EBT. And there was another uh, couple writers who had made a show for Netflix that has had a couple seasons out, and they talked about how because you get paid a good amount per week, but you don't get paid for all the weeks you work, and you have to have a lot of time down from not getting paid. That they had to steal food from the Netflix cafeteria in order to bring home for to their family every week.
For
Right.
real.
Yeah. So there put it like this. Let's even talk about actors. Um, you need to make 26,000 a year. I might have the numbers wrong, but basically the idea is there's a threshold of how much you need to make to qualify for health care in SAG. 80 something percent of people in SAG don't make enough to qualify for health care in SAG. So that tells you, and that's 160,000 people union. So the truth is, one of the truths is that, we're sold this idea that, that this is a meritocracy and that if you do good work, if you are talented at what you do, that you're going to be fine. And so one of the ways they sell that to us is by barraging us with movies and TV. So we think those are the people that are fine. I might not be okay, and the people around me might not be okay. Those are the people that are fine. So then we have this reaction sometimes, and I would have it doing music as well, where people would think, "Oh, you must be paid, right?" So, and I happen to be one of the lucky ones who am running a show, so I'm different than most of the people there. So, but that are in that union. So that's that fallacy. A lot of people are just not getting paid. When I went to down one time to picket in front of Netflix, and I was gonna go for the second shift in front of Paramount, I called a Lyft. The Lyft driver was a writer who was just on the picket line with me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that goes. Anyway, now, as you said, we're in the middle of this strike wave. That with it being 3,000 strikes in the last 3 years, that puts it at about the biggest strike that we've had since the biggest strike wave we've had since the 1970s. Um, and what that means, what that points to, is that there's a wave of class consciousness that's sweeping the working class, and not only and people not just understanding what side of the fence they're on and who's there with them, but people coming to understand how power functions under capitalism, and doing that through the withholding of labor. And the lessons that get learned from that are not only that the boss is exploiting you, but also when the police come to disrupt the strike, you start learning what the whole system is set up for, whose side they're on, who are they protecting. And that's a mass political education class for folks. But here's the other reason. Here's the other thing is that when you talk about creating, I'm often talking about my ideas of what communism would be like, as a world in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor, right? Um, a lot of revolutions that we look to, um, no matter where you stand on where they made their mistakes or not, um, is we think about the few people that led this revolution. We think about Che Guevara and Fidel and stuff like that. But what we don't often talk about is that one of the reasons they were able to do what they did was there was a mass wave of strikes happening. There were a general strike happening at the time, that allowed for a destabilization of power that put power, on the side of the working class so that they could do that. And there's umpteen examples of that. I think that a lot of radical politic now has has rightfully been influenced, as I have been, by what happened in the United States during the time of the New Left and the Black Power movement. And I think that, it was a time that in which we looked at the end goal, and where around the world people were at this other level than we were at, and we looked at emulating that other level that they were at, but not looking at the steps they had taken in their own regions to get to that place. And so I would say that, if we're trying to make a revolution in which uh, we create a whole different economic system, that creating a mass militant radical labor movement that uses the withholding of labor as a tactic and strategy in order to create a revolutionary movement that's needed. Um, and to your point about the general strike, you know, uh, that's something that needs to happen at some point, but it's not going to happen unless radicals get involved in the current labor movement and make sure that radical vision is part of it, because you can have a labor movement that grows and is not radical, right? And but people are yearning. A lot of what is going on, there are radical aspects to this. Like I said, a lot of these strikes that are going on, whether it was the one that almost happened with UPS, whether it was whether it's the writers or the actors, there are they are working because the people that are better off are striking, even though the demands are for a group of other folks. So you had that with the UPS drivers who were they already had their wages settled,
Mm-hmm.
and they were striking on behalf, about to strike on behalf of the part-time workers. You had that with Oakland teachers who um, won their wage issue and stayed out on strike, and people were like, okay, what's happening here, right? And they they were striking for common good issues that had to do uh, with giving services to homeless students, that had to do with uh, the the parents and teachers having control of the budget, uh, and other things like that. You had uh, during the pandemic, you had when people thought that not breathalyzers, but um, what's the thing they were using to breathe in hospitals?
Yeah, I know what you're talking
You
about.
know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. Anyway, when people when people thought that those were necessary, you had Boeing workers strike, and one of their demands was, we're not going to make any more engines right now. We want to make this hospital equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of their demands, that they were willing to strike for. You have a lot of radical things happening. When I'm saying, these are pushes where people are sacrificing their job to withhold labor in order for something that they see as bigger than them, right? And this is an opportunity, but I think sometimes, at least on social media, I see people saying we need a general strike. And my question is, are you organizing at your place of work?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, we do tend to cheer on the stuff that's happening and wish that it was more radical than it is. But it's not going to get there until we start working in it. And it's going to take a little while for that to happen.
So I wanted to thank you so much for that. I'm speaking with Boots Riley. of the coup writer, director here on Black Power Media, here on Rootwork. And I've just been taking notes while you've been speaking. Wanted to go in the time that we have over some of your key points. In the beginning, you talked about the idea that we've been sold that this is a meritocracy, and at the same time, there's a need for mass political education. I think part of that um, Hollywood dream that we've been sold about it being a meritocracy is that yes, you too can be rich, you too can live this life of luxury, and that's one of the things that we are being sold in all forms of media, or as we here on Black Power Media call it, propaganda. But the need for mass political education, I'm glad you brought that up because when most discussions take place around organizing the working class, solidarity of the working class, the need for militant labor action, I usually, depending upon the circle I'm running in, don't hear about the backwards reactionary nature of white workers and how historically white supremacy and racism has stymied and stifled solidarity, has stifled that consciousness, and in addition to that, uh, the police, just the lack of clarity around so much. I remember when Occupy Wall Street first started, people were really like, "Well, the police are part of the 99%," and let's just keep it a buck. A lot of those were young white people, whereas the black folks was like, "No, they not."
Mhm.
And a lot of people found out painfully the hard way when Occupy was broken up by the police. So I wanted to ask you your thoughts about, before we actually get it. Well, I wanted to ask you your thoughts about, as you said, the work that's going to be needed for a general strike. You've gone over that, but just this whole reactionary, backwards nature of the white working class.
Yeah. So, you know, none of us live in a vacuum, right? And so we are so there is a reason for the racist ideas that sections of the working class, sections of the white working class have about people of color, and it helps to tell a story. That is taught. That's part of an outlook that helps to tell the story of uh, this how this system uh, is not run on the exploitation of labor, how it has to do with the bad choices of those impoverished, and they use those racist ideas not just to sell ideas about people of color, about black folks, but to sell ideas about themselves, right? To sell ideas about the white working class, so that it hides as it hides the storyline. um, I'll say this, that what we're doing is creating an alternative storyline for folks to catch on to, for the white working class to also catch on to. Because the truth is, as we've seen with any revolution that tries to happen in one place, whether it's a country or just one area, whether you're talking about the Soviet Union or anything, it can't. There has to be what I see from those things, and what many have seen, is that you can't just have a socialist or communist revolution in one area or with one group of people. We got to have the whole working class overthrowing the ruling class. So the question is, how do you get from there to here? Using Occupy Oakland as an example. In other places, I think that was there. There were, in other places than where I was, I would say that was a thing. Maybe not the 99, that the police are part of the 99%, but Occupy Oakland, for instance, was started with a radical intention by radicals, and they weren't all black folks, right? And as I know from your show, we know that all black folks don't have a radical uh, point of view either. But
Mm,
um, so there were there that's why during Occupy Oakland, we put out a call, and had a general strike, and 50,000 people marched under that banner, and there were all sorts of things that had to do with that. But the point is that how do we create the conditions to which uh, the to which the white working class um, has the correct analysis, right? If if there are people that where racist ideas are skewing their analysis, we have to create the material conditions for that. Now we know that throughout history there has been the uh, the white working class has uh, been has battled with uh, black working class folks in labor issues around the idea, with folks being used to scab, things like that. But we see a different situation, and I hate to just be very geographically inclined, but in the Bay Area with the longshoremen, right?
Right, right.
Um, you had a situation where the leader of the longshoremen at the time um, was a revolutionary and knew that when they called for their strike, that the bosses were going to use the same playbook to try to pit communities against each other.
Mm,
And the in the longshoremen, they had a big battle in front of them because it was seen as less skilled than custodian work, right? Because you're
mm,
just moving stuff off the ship, right? So everybody, even union organizers, said you can't organize longshoremen because there's no one place of work. They can just pull the ship into a different place. They can do it, and so they knew they had a battle ahead of them. Longshoremen organized in 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 black communities, door to door, churches, nightclubs, famously, and
mm,
said, "Look, we're going to go on strike. Uh, they're going to try to pit us against each other, but if you join us in this strike, we'll make sure that this is a union that works together." And because of that, to this day, longshoremen in Oakland, 80% black folks, right?
mhm, mhm,
Longshoremen in the Bay Area, because what they fought for and won was so hard. And they fought battled tanks and all that. What they fought for and won was such that your card, that your employment card goes to your next of kin when you die.
mm,
And the union does the hiring, not the. So anyway, what I'm saying is there are instances around the world where you create the material conditions for that. I think when you don't have a struggle, then you don't have then you don't have a reason for, like, we don't want multiracial unity just for the sake of saying we got multiracial unity, and sometimes we've been trying to push for that
mm,
without any material goal that has to be accomplished together, right?
mm,
So with that, I would say another example is over in Watsonville, where when I first started getting involved in radical work, there was there was a Watsonville cannery workers strike in the mid '80s, and through this time they had in the community a big division. It was Filipino workers, Mexican workers, and Portuguese workers, mainly, and they were all fighting each other. You know, uh, I'm just talking about street fights, communities, that sort of thing, right? And there have been times when one group of them had gone on strike, the other ones didn't join in, and it lost. And at this point, they were all on strike, and they had this sense that, look, we are going to lose if we don't figure this out. And there was a call for unity, whereas before they've been trying to have dances and stuff where there was no struggle, like, how do we come together? And it didn't work because you need a material basis for unity, and a material and that's where that comes from. And so yes, what you're stating is an obstacle, but there is only one way to do it, is to get in struggle and to get in that fight. And I think um, what ends up happening is there can be, there's choices to be made by them. you know am I following this line of thinking that's clearly keeping, you know, me exploited as well, or do I look at for a more revolutionary way? I don't think it's going to happen just by politically educating people. I don't think they're going to watch a movie that teaches them not to be racist. I don't
Mhm.
think any of that. I think it's all going to happen with a material need, and that's how it happens with all of us, right? Is like the material situation creates the culture.
Mhm.
So
Last week, I was talking on the show about the Battle of Algiers, using that as an example of how to transform the criminal or colonial mentality into the revolutionary mentality, the way that George Jackson talked about. And for listeners, viewers, if you have not seen the Battle of Algiers, you need to see it and discuss it with a group of people. But the reason I bring that up, one of the scenes or areas of the film that we did not get to talk about, the FLN in Algeria, they called for a general strike because the question of Algeria's colonial status was about, and the war going on was about to be taken up in the United Nations. And so they wanted to show the unity of the country and ask for all Algerians to stay away from work, from shopping, etc. So this is an example of a colonized nation. Many people in the US don't look at quote unquote multiracial unity as something to be striven, if that's the word, for. That black people and other groups are, in fact, a colonized nation, and that the black working class needs to lead the way towards independence, needs to lead the way towards liberation. So, kind of understanding that when you look at it like that. And I remember the longshoremen in Oakland in particular, when it came to actions around Mumia Abu Jamal, yes, when it came to actions around Occupy, when it came to actions around Oscar Grant, Oakland, the Bay Area got shut down. Didn't nothing happen. And all praises and appreciation toward that. August is known as Black August. I did not know. I just found out recently that August is also, I think, Black Business Month. One of the key things I think people need to talk more about during Black August is when the brothers in the California penal system, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, when they commenced commemorating, honoring their fallen comrades, they did not purchase from the prison commissary what they call the canteen. They stayed away. And many times when it comes to black people and our quote unquote buying power, shout out to Jared Ball, we talk about how we can better harness our buying power or our dollars. And I'm thinking that we need to have a general strike. We need to pull out. We need to stay away from, as opposed to spending money in a targeted manner. How about we not spend? So
yeah,
that's why I wanted to talk with you today and couch this around the language of a general strike. But
okay.
basically, giving
I
you all
guess
of that background.
we're using different terminology because
Hmm.
um, a strike doesn't have to do with spending in my book, right?
Right. Hmm.
And so just so that we know, that's
Well,
just not
I guess
how
I'm talking about a
I'm using.
boycott. I guess I'm
Yeah,
talking basically a boycott.
yeah, and
Not
and
only, yeah.
and I got a couple things to say about that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to go quick, but
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yes.
So when I was first getting radicalized, one of the things I did was get involved in helping to organize farm workers in the Central California Valley,
Hmm.
right? And it was a group called the Anti-Racist Farm Workers Union. And so I was in Delano and McFarland, right?
Right.
Wasco, stuff like that, right? And these folks were a group of folks who were students in Mexico in '68 and um, had survived the massacre that happened there, right? And instead of what happens to some folks that are fleeing uh, repression, they go to another country and they kind of hide out. They were like, well, no, if we're going to the US, we want to go where we can still help make the revolution happen. So the first thing that they did was they joined the UFW, right? They moved to California, joined the UFW.
Okay.
And the UFW at the time, I want to preface this by saying UFW does not have these same politics and has gone through a transformation since then. But
Okay.
at the time, and they, at the time, they, joined under Cesar Chavez, and Cesar Chavez, uh, they were working against undocumented workers. They were totally against them,
Mm-hmm.
calling them derogatory, racist names, and not only publishing that in their newspapers, but helping immigration officers to deport people
Mm-hmm.
and manning the borders. So
Mm-hmm.
this group of folks were like, "Oh, that's not the revolution. That's not the revolutionary organization we want to go to," and they moved on. I say that to say this: boycotts got very popular on the left because of the UFW at the time. And the reason that one of the reasons that the UFW called for boycotts and why it got so popular, boycott grapes at the time, was because they couldn't organize in the fields because most of the workers were undocumented workers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's only part of the story, and I'm not saying the whole thing. Like I said, in the 70s, later on, they went through a massive transformation and repudiated all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what that's what and so I would say this: boycotts got popular as a replacement for strikes.
Okay.
And the reason why I think that it is not necessarily the way to go is because I also point to, I think it was Earl O'Farry Hutcherson had a study of this boycott of Coca-Cola that happened in the late 70s, early 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and talked about how and showed how they had this massive thing because Coke was they were doing something terrible to Black liquor store owners. And so the idea was they did this massive campaign, that Jesse Jackson was a part of and publicized, don't buy Coke and this and that. And it was like people were, and according to this, a lot of people were very involved in that. And there was this massive thing. And in the end, Coke changed whatever their deal was they were doing with Black liquor store owners. But the truth about it is, we put in that thing, was that the amount of money that lost Coca-Cola was the same as their discretionary fund for 1 year.
Hmm.
So the amount of financial pain you can inflict, even when you have this massive campaign with, somewhat popular figures in it, is nowhere near as much as you can inflict when you stop it at the point of production.
Withhold labor power.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's harder because with the boycott, a lot of people can kind of feel good. The people that would be the best organizers are now feeling like they did their thing because they're not buying this and they are buying this. And it kind of gets us this sort of easily connectable thing. But all the listeners know it's, and you get to connect with people that already think the way you think, right? And the people that don't agree with it, they can just buy their stuff and you'll never know, right?
Right.
But organizing on the job is harder because you got people there that don't agree with you. You got people there that, you got to build with them and find some common ground where maybe you don't get along, maybe all sorts of things, but you end up having to become a different kind of person than you are in order to connect with them. And I think that in general, the left has, for the last 30 years, we've been doing let's have a rally on Saturday at 6 o'clock.
When ain't nobody there, ain't nobody there.
Yeah. So and I'm not saying boycotts can't be helpful in addition, but even with the writer strike, the WGA had done certain, calculations, and people were like, "Oh, should we boycott the streamers?" And they were like, "Well, look, look how much damage we cause by not doing this, by
Hmm.
stopping production, as opposed to, you know, telling people to not watch, because you never know who's not watching.
Right.
And you know, and it becomes just, you know, what you're asking of people, you're not asking them to be involved, and so it's not as radicalized. It ends up being like uh you know, what Slavoj Žižek was talking about, where, you know, you buy at Starbucks and it says you're helping the rainforest, and you feel like you did your thing, and you buy your Starbucks and you keep going,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, that's all I would say, is that there's a chance. We're at a point right now where we got a chance for people to be involved at a much bigger level, because also, you know, you boycott, you know, if it's about let's support black business, we got a thing there too. Like, you know, Nigeria got a lot of black business, right?
Yes, sir.
And the point is where are we at with the exploitation of labor, and what kind of economic system are we going to create? So
I've been speaking with Boots Riley, artist, activist, writer, director, multi hyphenate, um, organizer of, founder of the Coup. And I told your assistant, we're going to do a minimum of 15 minutes, hopefully
oh,
not
okay.
more.
I'm sorry, that was probably my
Oh,
first
no.
answer was 15 minutes long.
Oh, no. I listen, I don't want to. I don't want to be the reason that you never ever come back to Black Power Media again. That time to seize way kept me all afternoon. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you coming on the show today, and of course, we want you to come back. But again, I don't. I told her I ain't gonna keep him that long, and now we're going on almost 40 minutes.
Okay, cool.
But
Well, I'm sorry for being so
no,
long-winded.
Boots, don't you ever apologize. Don't you ever apologize. I just want you to not be mad at me. I don't care what else is going on. Just don't be mad at Tom the Seasway.
All
That's
right.
all I'm saying.
No,
But
I'm not at all.
appreciate you coming on
Yeah.
today. Appreciate you giving those remarks. Looking so forward to the work that you have coming up in the community, as well as once this strike is over, hoping to bring you back on to talk more about your current projects and to chop it up with you regarding what we need to do in order to get free, the unity of art and struggle, all of that. So I just want to let you know, appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate what you're doing on the show, and thank you for having me and let me throw my 2 cents in there.
Absolutely.
All right.
Um, now, if the we got a whole, but I'm afraid to look at the comments and questions because again, I understand that you're honoring the dictates of the WGA. I don't want something to slide up in here, but any parting words? Is there anything that you want listeners, anything that you want viewers to know how we can be supportive in this current labor struggle?
Well, I'll say this. You know, one thing I do want to make clear is that you did talk about the real threat that executives leaked out that the AMPTP was doing, where they're like, we're going to let the writers, you know, start getting evicted, then we're going to start negotiating with them. But there's a couple things that they underestimate,
Okay.
because, and part of their underestimation comes from their logic of how they think. Like they're not able to think about, um, you know, they never sacrifice for something larger than themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got people already doing that. You got people already like, so you're dealing with a different group of folks. And also the way writers and actors are is we're used to not having work for 9 months out of the year,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even when you do make something, you know, okay, this might be my last money, right? So um so you know, our waiting time is a little bit longer than that, than they think it is, or a lot longer. The other thing that they're underestimating is that as it keeps going longer, it's inspiring other people. It's inspiring, you know, so VFX folks, the folks that make the that do the computer programming that make the effects on TV, as opposed to special effects that happen on set. VFX workers have famously been unorganized, and they just started a union, right? The other day, yesterday or the day before, right? Um, and people are and people are getting even more hype. What they miscalculated was the the more terrible that they are to us, the stronger people want to fight right now,
Mm.
and are determined to win. And it's also inspiring people. And I guess that was maybe more your first question. Um, People, this is one of the more visible strikes. Like you could have a strike at a lot of places that the news just doesn't report, but because there are actors and writers involved in this, a lot of people know about it that wouldn't normally know about it. A lot of people are getting it. It spreads around, and so we're seeing people organizing a little bit more than they even were before. And that doesn't just happen from stuff like this, but it happens every time there's a strike. During a couple years ago, when all the supermarkets were going on strike in order to get PPE stuff, um, it literally would happen. And I post about it. Then somebody would call me that worked at another Safeway and saw one that, or someplace else, and saw one that went on strike and said, "How do we do that? Can you put me in contact?" And then all of a sudden you see them go on strike like a few hours later. And you know, this fighting begets fighting. And but it's our job to also make sure it's not just fighting, that because you can be militant and not be radical, and you can be radical and not be militant. So we need to make sure there's a radical vision by organizing, by connecting with. And if for some reason, we're not making headway at the jobs that we're at, we can go help out other people organizing on their job too.
Boots Riley of the Coup, straight out of Oakland. Thank you so much for being on Rootwork today.
Peace. Thank you.
So, apologies again to the BPM family. I'm so sorry, y'all. I just didn't want to take a chance and get all tripped up and trying to deal with your questions, your comments, your concerns. Boots, did you want to come back in for a second?
Talking to me. No, I thought you were talking to me, so I was talking back to you. So I was like, okay.
No, sir. I'm talking to the BPM fam who
Right.
are very animated today.
Okay.
But I'm going to bring you back. Like I
All right.
said, somebody's going to bring you back and you'll find out how animated they are.
All
But
right.
thank you again so
Cool.
much.
Peace. Bye.
Peace. BPM fam, please forgive me. I'm going to do better. Well, it wasn't all my fault. But the point being, thank you so much for hanging with us. Please don't be mad that I couldn't have y'all talk to Boots directly. Please like the video anyway. Please like, subscribe, share. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Share the video, like the video. Continue to support. Continue to support all the other programs here on Black Power Media. Don't forget to tune in on this Thursday for the Black August Study and Struggle Series number 2, where we're talking about Kawasi Balagoon, Man Child Born on Sunday, Wild One. And if you haven't already, please go back and look at the Study and Struggle session number 1 from last Thursday, where we talked about the Battle of Algiers and the transforming of the colonial criminal mentality. My name is Tonda Sizwe Shimaringa. Thank you for watching. Peace.